A pleasant morning to everyone. I am Jonabel Jokton, your discussant, and today I'm going to discuss about neurofunctional theory. But before I tackle about Module 10, let me read to you first our objectives. At the end of this module, you should be able to first discuss the relevance of neurofunctional theory in teaching and learning a language. Second, to differentiate primary language acquisition from secondary language acquisition. Third, explain the Mendelian's neurofunctional theory in relation to SLA. And lastly, to enumerate and describe the different types of aphasia. Linguists are concerned with analysis of the structure of language and the creation of models which explain certain linguistic phenomena. One field of study that aids linguists in finding answers to questions regarding language learning and language acquisition is psycholinguistics. It pursues the question, how is language actually stored in and processed by the brain? The brain is one of the most complex organs of the human body. Hence, knowledge about its inner working is extremely limited. The study of the human brain is made difficult primarily for two reasons. First, the brain is well protected in a bony covering, making access to it extremely difficult. Second, the neurons of the brain do not regenerate. Thus, an invasive manipulation of the brain carries with it the real risk of introducing permanent brain damage. Let's now proceed to the description of the theory. The Mendelia of 1979 defines the scope of a neurofunctional approaches as a neurofunctional perspective on language attempts to characterize the neurolinguistic information processing systems responsible for the development and use of language. The basic premise of neurofunctional view of SLA or secondary language acquisition is that there is a connection between language function and the neural anatomy. It is important, however, to recognize that, as Hatch of 1983 puts it, there is no single black box for language in the brain. It is not possible to identify precisely which areas of the brain are associated with language functioning. It is therefore better to speak of the relative contribution of some areas more than others under certain conditions. Neurofunctional accounts of SLA have considered the contribution of two areas of the brain, the right as opposed to the left hemisphere and the areas of the left hemisphere, in particular those as Wernicke's and Broca's areas, which clinical studies have shown to be closely associated with the comprehension and production of language. Right hemisphere functioning is generally associated with holistic processing as opposed to serial or analytic processing which occurs in the left hemisphere. Krashen and Obler of 1981 suggested that the right hemisphere is responsible for storing and processing of formulaic speech. Genesi of 1982 made another research and found out that the right hemisphere is associated to a greater extent with informal than formal language acquisitions. Where the left hemisphere is concerned, there is less clarity regarding the location of specific language functions. In general, the left hemisphere is associated with creative language use, including syntactic and semantic processing, and the motor operations involved in speaking and writing. We have here the left and right brain dominance, where left brain dominance is for intellectual, that remembers names, responds to verbal instructions and explanations, experiments systematically and with control, prepares talking and writing, rarely uses metaphors, analytic reader, planned and structured, makes objective judgments, controls feelings, and favors logical problem solving. While the right brain dominance is for intuitive, that remembers faces, responds to demonstrated, illustrated, and symbolic instructions, experiments randomly and with less restraints, prefers drawing and manipulating objects, frequently uses metaphors, synthesizing reader, fluid and spontaneous, makes subjective judgments, more free with feelings, and favors intuitive problem solving. Stiefik of 1982 concluded that left brain dominant second language learners are better at producing separate words, gathering the specifics of language, carrying out sequences of operations, and dealing with abstraction, classification, labeling, and reorganization. Right brain dominant learners, on the other hand, appear to deal better with whole images, with generalizations, with metaphors, and with emotional reactions and artistic expressions. From the viewpoint of Lamendalia, there are two basic types of language acquisition. First is the primary language acquisition, which is found in the child's acquisition of one or more languages from 2 to 5 years. Second is the secondary language acquisition, which is subdivided into foreign language learning and second language acquisition. Aphasia provides support for the view that language is localized in the left hemisphere. By the way, aphasia is a language disorder caused by the damage in a specific area of the brain that controls language expression and comprehension. Aphasia usually happens suddenly after a stroke or a head injury, but it can also come on gradually from a slow-growing brain tumor or a disease that causes progressive permanent damage. There are different types of aphasia which yield over more information about where specific linguistic abilities are located. Depending upon where brain damage is sustained, different abilities will be affected. Damage to a region of the brain known as Broca's area will result in one type of aphasia called Broca's aphasia. Broca's aphasiacs suffer from an inability to plan the motor sequences used in speech. When they attempt to speak, they speak haltingly and have a difficult time getting the words out. While Broca's aphasia results in primarily expressive difficulties, Wernicke's aphasia results in primarily receptive disorders. However, even though a patient with Wernicke's aphasia does not find it hard to speak, there is a tendency for the aphasiacs to produce semantically incoherent speech. Patients with Wernicke's aphasia are unable to comprehend the speech of others. They often cannot follow simple directions or instructions such as stand up, turn to your right, and so on. The last type of aphasia, which will be discussed, is called conduction aphasia. A patient suffering from conduction aphasia sounds something like a Wernicke's aphasia. Fluent but meaningless speech, but shows signs of being able to comprehend the speech of others. The patient will be able to understand utterances, but will not be able to repeat them. And that ends my topic. I hope that you now have a clear idea of the relevance and significance of the neurofunctional theory in relation to second language acquisition. Thank you for listening.